as it comes along. I don't think there's any right or wrong way to do it, as long as the streaming services come up. They did Thursday night. We had a great talk, Chris and I. So I'm trusting that it's going to go well again.
Oh, I just got the signal for it.
Live on custom streaming service.
You know what, let me try to...
Okay, so there we go. I think we're live. So hello, Facebook. Hello, YouTube. Hello, everybody. This is Sam Ridgeway with Viking Alternative Medicine. And today we have Chris Neal and Danny Bossa. And we're going to talk about whether AIs, it's just, we're going to talk about whether AIs are necessary, if the thought of that is necessary. So we're going to kind of go with both ways. We give a little time to one person, then a little time to the other, and make sure that this is a whole fair thing. The objective of this is not to win. That's not it. It's to educate all of you so you can get all of the information you need to make an educated decision about your health and your well-being. So to begin this whole thing, I'll start off with you, Danny. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself so people know who you are?
Sure thing. I'm actually sending off this link to a few people.
Oh, go ahead.
Here. Sorry. Okay. So my name is Danny Bossa. You may have seen me on the TRT and hormone optimization that I do a little bit of work for with some people. I'm just gonna put this shade down a bit because it's a bit much in my face. Bear with me a sec. Sorry, guys. It's a little too much sun. That's better. Okay. That's maybe too much in dark, but whatever. So I've done some work with TRT and hormone optimization. I am not a physician. I actually own an IT consulting company. So you say, well, what the hell does this guy have why would this guy be credible in regards to this stuff? I'm a problem solver by trade. That's what I do best. You give me a problem, I solve it, whether it has to do with IT or anything else. That's what I do best. I suffered from deficient levels of testosterone. I had every single symptom you could possibly imagine. It was hurting relationships. It was hurting my health. It was hurting, I can go into a huge list. Couldn't find any doctors in the area that really knew what they were doing. And everything that I tried that they had, suggested I do didn't work. And it was a very long, painful process. So I started getting more involved, figuring, okay, well, if they can't solve the problem, I'm going to need to solve this problem. And learned as much as I can. I got involved with Facebook groups and forums, and I started becoming friends with a lot of different doctors, and they were all calling me and teaching me. I don't really know how I wound up doing this, but that's kind of what happened. Ended up learning so much that I eventually figured out my issues, and my issues today are completely resolved. What I'm doing today has nothing to do whatsoever with what any of the doctors were telling me to do. It was a stark contrast. And as I was posting in these groups, a lot of people would be reaching out to me, say, well, what did you do to fix this? And I would tell them, like, well, that's not what my doctors say. I'm like, I know that's not what your doctors say. That's same issue. You're having the same issue I did. And with a little bit of time, I had a lot of people reaching out for, advice or opinion. I can't call it medical advice because, again, I'm not a doctor, and I can't provide advice, but I can say, well, this is what I would do in your situation. And I've been getting bombarded with messages and whatnot. Lately, I've even started doing some, half-hour paid consulting sessions as an opinion only. This is Danny Bossa's opinion, not to be misconstrued as medical advice. And I've spoken to doctors all over the world. This week, I got a call from Neal, which I'm sure you guys have heard. We've been mailing back and forth. I've spoken to Terry Hutog, to Mark Gordon, I've got a network of doctors all over the world, and whoever is doing very well, if somebody has an issue, I will send them to that doctor. I don't get referral fees. I make no money off that stuff at all. It's like, hey, you're in Nashville. I know a great place to go in Nashville, go there. And that's pretty much it. So just helping guys unlearn a lot of the stuff that they've learned and educate based on science, strictly on science.
Perfect. Okay. And Chris, why don't you kind of give an overview of what you're doing, your YouTube channel, maybe, where people can find more information about you or kind of geek out with you, as you call it. So just let them know who you are.
Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Chris Neal, and maybe you've seen me on Real Science with Chris Neal. I'm the clinical supervisor for Viking Alternative Medicine, and I've been practicing hormone replacement therapy for a while now, and practicing different fields of medicine: orthopedic surgery, general surgery, pain management, But I've always been involved in health, fitness, and wellness. And when about 10, 12 years ago, I started suffering with symptoms myself of low testosterone and went through the whole frustration with that, and and I did my best to try and fight it off, and say, well, I need to just suck it up, the guys, don't complain, we keep pushing through, we don't, and until I realized something is actually wrong, and went down the path of figuring that out, and ultimately, got on therapy, and it did change my life. But I found that, there's very little good information out there about TRT. And I said, wait a minute, I went to medical school and I wasn't taught any of this stuff, so where in the world are all these other doctors getting their information from? How are they prescribing stuff that they weren't instructed on? And then I started going to other doctors, talking to other doctors, and looking and talking to other people and other patients about it, realizing that their basis of information is pretty bad. And this is a new field that was so vital and so important to me, and it needs some help. So I was telling Danny earlier this morning that I feel that we're kind of like, pilgrims in a brand new land here, because what's most exciting to me is I'm very I am a self-proclaimed geek, and I do like to geek out on this information. It excites me to know that this stuff is brand new. So as and anyone that's done any research in hormone replacement therapy will see how new it is, because there are many things that people don't agree on. And when there's a situation where, hey, some people say this, some people say that, then in reality, maybe they're both right, and so we wanted to just join together, just to have a good, healthy discussion about stuff. And I'm all for that. I look at things very mechanically, and I'm learning all the time. And so this is just about expanding the field of hormone replacement therapy, and trying to help people out. So I'm excited about this.
Awesome.
All right. Perfect. So here's what I'd like to, kind of the format of this is I'd like to ask like each of you a question, and then if you disagree with the other person, instead of talking over each other so everybody can get all the information that they need, just kind of write it down. And then when we switch back over, you can say, hey, I'd like to go back to this and explain why I think I have a different view or different theory on this. And that way we can kind of keep everything clean. So I want to also let everybody know that this is interactive. So after a couple of questions, we'll go in and I'll look over at the chat screen here, find questions that have to do with an AI, an aromatase inhibitor, and then we'll kind of ask questions to both Chris and Danny based upon that to get their viewpoint. So I do want this to be interactive, so it's not just us preaching to you, it's you asking the questions that you want answered. So the first one, and I'll start off with you, Danny, is so is there a place for an AI and a TRT protocol? And it doesn't mean that it's just yes or no answer. There could be some gray area in that. But because this whole entire debate, if you will, is based upon that, what are an overview of your thoughts on whether or not there's a place for it?
Okay, so the first thing what you can look at when you talk about this is what are the reasons that people are taking aromatase inhibitors? So when you're starting off with somebody in your practice and saying, you got to take an AI, what are the typical reasons guys are taking an AI? Well, they're thinking of all the bad stuff that happens. They're thinking of, I don't want to get gyno. That's a huge thing with guys. I don't want to get gyno. I hear you can get some water retention. I don't want to tank my libido. I don't want to, I don't want my erections to go away. And I don't want any of that bad stuff, because that's you think of estradiol as that woman hormone, and you're thinking about, women on PMS and their estrogen and blah, 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 blah. I don't want any of that. I want to have the manly testosterone flowing through my veins, and as little as that little womanly crap going through. And the interesting thing is it couldn't be further from the truth. And I actually want to interject here really, really quick on a little analogy I thought of right before we got on, is the stuff I'm going to be telling you guys when it comes to your whole notion about AI is a bit of like a religion to some people. So the stuff I'm going to be saying is going to be almost the equivalent of you believe in God, as an example, and I basically demonstrate no, God doesn't exist. it goes against everything you believe, and you're not just going to change your mind in a second. It took somebody 2 years to basically convince me. And it's a very tough thing to wrap your brain around when all you've ever thought of is estradiol is bad and I need to control it and I need to manage it. You won't just make that switch. So a lot of the stuff I'm telling you now is going to come across as a bit weird, especially for the viewers. Kind of like the guy when you were a kid and you used to believe in Santa Claus, and then someone told you that Santa Claus doesn't exist. You have this period of like, but how's it possible? And say, he has to exist. I mean, it had the presents. I mean, where do they? It doesn't, But eventually, you learn that Santa Claus doesn't exist. And then when you hear people talk about Santa Claus, you look back and like you just roll your eyes, like, yeah, you just haven't caught up at this point. I was once like you, but now I know better. You just haven't made that transition over. So, is there a use for aromatase inhibitor? In the case sometimes of extreme nostalgia, it can sometimes be used. But believe it or not, aromatase inhibitors do not exert the effect in the body that most people believe. So I don't know if you want this to be a quick answer. It's an extremely rare circumstance that an aromatase inhibitor would be used in a man. Aromatase inhibitors were actually designed for women with cancer. Okay, so the thought was to deprive the cancer cells of estradiol, believing estradiol was going to be basically causing these cancer cells to proliferate more. They figured, let's cut off the estradiol. Knowing that wasn't particularly a very healthy thing, but it was kind of like, do the ends justify the means? Okay, well, we're going to give this toxic substance to a woman with cancer to hopefully not have her die. Okay, but when we're talking about men on TRT, we don't have cancer. So the thought of taking this aromatase inhibitor is a bit silly. So it is a very, 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 very unbelievably rare circumstance to take it, maybe, as I said, for severe nostalgia, though everybody and their brother and their friend thinks that they are that one exception that they need it. And over this talk, I'll demonstrate how that's not entirely true.
Okay, that's great. And then Chris, we'll get an overview from you, because then we can go into certain things like what's going to happen to you if you do take it, and other topics that spin off of this. But an overview to the question of, is an aromatase inhibitor necessary for a TRT protocol? And it's not just always a yes, no answer. There could be, what is the percentage of time you would feel? That just an overview of how you're feeling is with that topic.
So to answer that appropriately, as a clinician, I have to go through a couple different points. My grandpa was owned a construction company, and my dad was very much of a tool guy. All of his tools were passed down to my dad, and then now they're all passed down to me. And I'm very much of a tool guy. So when it comes to fixing anything, I literally might pull out a tool from the 1940s that works great. So, but it depends on what I'm working on, so I see Anastrozole as a tool. I don't, and I agree with Danny. So like more than I agree with you so much that AIs are very much like a religion. And I think I'll take it a step further. I think HRT for some people are very much like a religion to certain aspects. People tend to idolize one way of thinking, or even one YouTube personality. They'll say, I'll put it this way. I'll have guys come to me as a patient, and they'll say, they've never been on testosterone therapy before. They have all the symptoms. They've been researching for months, and they know it all. So they come to me and they say, well, I follow such and such on YouTube, and I want to feel and look exactly like him. So I have to be on his protocol. And I'll tell him, okay, well, we really don't know how your body's going to respond. You are your own person. Everybody's very different. And like, no. I need to take my protocol like this person. And that's where the idolatry comes in, and that's the problem that HRT suffers with Western medicine, is that Western medicine doesn't know how to treat anything that doesn't pass through a rotating door. Like, we have to be able to individualize things. So in order to do that appropriately, we have to see our patients as individuals. So I would so anyway, these guys, they want to get started a very specific way, and for whatever reason, and I tell them, okay, that's not necessarily what I would recommend. That might be your path, maybe, but maybe not, because you're different. And then I get a call from them 3, 4, 6, 8 weeks later, like, and they're having all kinds of issues, and they're like, why is this happening? This doesn't make any sense. I'm supposed to feel just like the YouTube person, and it doesn't work that way,
Right.
and that doesn't matter whether it's with AIs or with testosterone dose or with, anything having to do with HRT, because really when it comes to optimization, in order to truly optimize something, you have to be able to look at the patient as an individual, and have the tools and utilize the tools and understanding appropriately to get them where they need to be.
Mhm.
And that's not always a one-way answer, I think. So I tell guys very often, you don't need to be on an AI, because based on their mechanism, their bodies just do better without it. And then I have other guys that if they're not on an AI, then they're a mess. I will say that, yes, Anastrozol's original creation was for breast cancer. The typical and that's breast cancer specifically, because certain breast cancers, basically feed off of estrogen. So the standard starting dose for women with breast cancer with anastrozole is 1 milligram a day, and that's a huge dose for any guy on TRT, and that's so taking a small fraction of that is not going to give you the same results as obviously taking it every day. But I've had endocrinologists give patients 100 milligrams of testosterone every 2 weeks and put them on 1 milligram of anastrozole per day. And this is how it works. Everybody takes it and it's like, wow, oh my God, that's not how you use the tools. So anyway, I'm a tool guy, and I think I like to have access to every tool possible, for me. And I don't want to throw away a tool. I never throw away tools.
Right now, a lot of times, Chris, when you do prescribe that, you send it out and you say, okay, just put this in your cabinet. And I'm just going to send this out there. It's going to be there if you need it, rather than we find out that you do need it. And all of a sudden, we're at this thing where we're trying to get it shipped to you overnight.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we will prescribe it, but it isn't necessarily, I don't think that we say that it has to be. So that's in agreement with Danny. So Jenny, we got a question here from Chad. He says, at what point in time is there excess estradiol in the body, thus needing an AI? So in those rare cases that you say it may be necessary, the unicorn cases, is there a certain level or an indicator where you're like, you know what, you are one of those rare people?
This question to me or to Chris?
To you, Danny. Sorry.
To me. Okay.
Yeah.
So believe this or not, everybody wants their testosterone as high as possible, right? Everyone's like, my doctor gave me this much, cool, or my levels were at 1100, now they're at 1500, cool. And the higher the testosterone level, everyone gets excited. For some reason, the higher the estradiol level, everyone starts kind of losing their shit. And it's like, oh no, this is bad. I don't want this to go up.
Mm-hmm.
When you raise testosterone, estradiol will follow. That is how it works. If you've got a testosterone of 1,000, total, NGDL, and your estradiol is at, 40, you can expect that if your testosterone goes to 2,000, well, your estradiol will probably be 80 or higher or whatever else. That's the way that it works. You want to have healthy levels of both. And when I say healthy levels, people say, okay, healthy level means I got to be in this range of 20 to 30 for estradiol. No. In every single study that we have, and we will find a time to go through some studies I have regarding estradiol in general, benefits, and the harm in reducing it, as well as the toxicity of AIs. I know that Chris just brought up a point saying, if they're taking a big dose, so if I only take this little bit, it's not so bad. The men that are given estradiol will have more benefits in literally every single study, and we're going to go through them. If you want to have better libido, you want to have better erections, you want to have better bone mineral density, you want to have better cognition, you want to reduce your risk for cardiovascular disease, for osteoporosis, for Alzheimer's, for dementia, sexual function, everything in that encompasses this this is going to be coming from estradiol and not from testosterone. Estradiol is what brings all of these benefits. In every single study where you have healthy levels of testosterone and you lower the benefit, you lower estradiol, you're basically measurably, demonstrably lowering every single one of these benefits. In every single study where they gave estradiol to any of these patients, all of these benefits improved. The interesting thing is the higher they raised estradiol, and this is going to be a big shock to you, the better their libido and erections were. So you say, okay, well, I want to reduce my estradiol. I want to manage it. Okay, well, but the more that you gave the estradiol, the better and higher libido they got. So why would you want to reduce your libido and erections? Isn't that the thing that you're after on TRT? Everyone believes that it's the testosterone that has all of the benefits, and it's not so. Testosterone will do about half of them. Estradiol does the rest. If you block the estradiol, you are blocking literally half of those benefits. I only want to block it a little bit. Well, you're going to block those benefits by a little bit. And that's how it works. The new consensus now based on, and again, I'll go through the studies at one point because I don't just like saying stuff without demonstrating my position, is the more estradiol you have, the healthier you will be. And I know that is going to break some of your heads. The viewers watching right now is like, that is the most full of shit thing I've ever heard someone utter on YouTube. And I get it because I was just like you. I argued, you should have seen me when I started on TRT. I argue with my doctor, literally almost to the point of physical violence. You got to give me that AI because if you don't, I'm going to grow tits and I won't be able to have an erection and all these things. And he was trying to talk me out of it. So I went through that period, and to switch over took me 2 years. And the funny thing is that now all of the physicians that I deal with were all, forgive me for saying, where you are and where a lot of the viewers are. And it's not anyone's fault. This is what everybody was taught. Even Neal, who I've talked to this week, told me I used to prescribe AIs because that's what we were taught. But the ones that went through the literature and gone through the studies and said, wait a sec, none of this doesn't make any sense. Well, let me try this out in practice to see what it does. And in doing so, everybody improves. So all the physicians that used to use an AI now don't. So you have to think about it. If you've tried A and you tried B, you only want to do what works, right? You're not going to just go to B just because of I want to be part of the anti-AI cult. No, I don't care what the answer is. I just want the right answer, something I can actually demonstrate. If I've tried A and I've tried B, I just want to see which one works. If it's better to take an AI and I'm going to get better results, that's what I'm going to do. But all of the studies say that it doesn't. So they've all tried not doing that. They all improved. All of their patients improved to the point that now if I ask them, hey guys, you've tried both, will you ever go back to an AI? And they're like, hell no. Now that we've tried both, the outcome is so ridiculously obvious that it saddens them to think that they ever even gave a 1/4 milligram of Arimidex to a patient before. None of them have their patients on Arimidex. None of them. They don't even measure estradiol anymore. Because why measure anything you're not going to do anything about? The only time that they'll measure estradiol is if they suspect that there might be a deficiency. The guy has low E2 symptoms, meaning poor libido, poor erection strength, and whatever. Some of these guys actually have a lack of aromatase. They have an aromatase deficiency where their bodies aren't converting enough testosterone to estradiol, and they have all these issues. A lot of these men actually need to take exogenous estradiol. And the funny thing is that with these people, the more of this exogenous estradiol they take, the higher their libido, the higher erections, and the higher everything else that occurs. And a little interesting point, I was talking to Neal this week. He said that men can feel testosterone. They can feel the effects of I feel confident and I feel manly and I feel sexual, whatever. Believe it or not, you do not feel the effects of estradiol. You will sense, if you tank, any of you guys have ever tanked your estradiol, your joints will be really, really painful, right? You get joint pain. So it's like, I feel that my joints hurt, but it doesn't cause any type of the behavioral or any type of those feelings that people attribute to estradiol. Oh, I cry at movies, or it makes me feel sad, or I feel like PMS symptoms. Also, by the way, guys, and Chris, I watched one of your videos recently, and you brought up the PMS symptoms. People say, I don't want to get PMS symptoms like women because, that's estradiol related. Women at the beginning of their cycle, the estradiol will go up and up and up and up and up to the point of the day of ovulation. And that's when their estradiol is the highest. That is when they have the highest libido. That's when they feel their best. That's when my wife wants to jump me, that day when her estrogen is the highest. And after that day, estradiol will start to go down, and you'll start to feel more and more miserable. There's a little peak again after, but on the week of the PMS, that estrogen is tanking. Progesterone is also coming up, which is basically kind of antagonizes those effects of estrogen. And that's when women feel their worst, is when estrogen is completely tanked. As soon as they get their period, estradiol starts coming back up. Guess what? They start feeling better, and all their libido and sense of well-being comes back. So,
all right.
Again, it's stark contrast to what everybody was taught.
All right, Chris, you've heard Danny's explanation of that. And what would you say to the same thing on Chad's question? Is there an excess estradiol number or something, or place where you would feel it was definitely necessary? And then anything in Danny's explanation that you say, you know what, here's how I think, or here's where I think the science takes us?
Yeah. So great. So I have a couple there. I've made a couple notes, and I'm going to try and break that down as much as I can. Where to start? So the idea that that estradiol is, you well, let me start with the PMS first, because I don't want to miss that. Now, the majority, or a good majority of the estradiol that's formed in women, and I don't know how many women are out there, that you guys work with or not, but we work with a lot of women, premenopausal, postmenopausal, menopausal, with all different ages and stages, estrogen dominance, and all kinds of issues. So the issue is that they're waves, like you mentioned. They're waves of estradiol that float up and float down. They're waves of estrogen, are in the case of PMS, are imbalanced. Usually there's too high of estrogen that's rising, and certain things happen: ovulation, yes, and the initiation of the period. But we know that estrogen, the good majority of it, starts out as testosterone, and it's converted, aromatized from testosterone into estrogen. So the testosterone levels are also higher during those times too. So but the estrogen, the estrogen waves are also very much tied to many symptoms too. So I'm not saying estrogen is all bad, but I'm also not saying estrogen is all good either. You need to have a good balance of estrogen, and everybody, like I said before, everybody is very different, but it is important to have some estrogen. A lot of the studies out there, they completely negate the aromatase enzyme, completely block that, or that's the problem with studies, is studies are very, they're oftentimes not very realistic in practical settings, because you're either looking at mice, or I saw one study, where they're comparing just testosterone therapy to therapy where you're just taking an AI and SARMs. And I don't like who does that, how we attribute, and that's the problem that's one of the biggest problems I've found with Western medicine, is that so often we try and categorize people and try our best to put people on the same thing, and I wish so badly that my job was so easy that I could just forget about that type of that tool. Well, you know what, we don't have to worry about that. I don't even have to check it. We don't have to look at it. Well, let's just put everybody on the same, and it doesn't work that way, because once you see enough people, like you actually go through the people that are like that don't have to be on an AI at all, because their levels of estrogen are right where they need to be, at the given dosage of testosterone, and they're in balance. They feel great, which is what's important. They feel awesome. They're getting all the benefits. They're not having any side effects. And that's it. So then we see other guys that, on varying doses of testosterone, they're having estrogen issues, and what do? In a case like that, I've seen patients that come from other doctors, and this is the thing that's lost a lot of times in studies, and it's lost a lot of times when you talk to other clinics. So many patients come from other clinics to us and to me to be worked on because they go years, with their doctor only using certain tools. And they come to me and they say, well, my doctor refuses to use this or whatever. My doctor will only do this, and he tells me I don't need that at all. And I've never, ever felt good. What do we do? Are we so we have to have he's going to want to go to somebody that knows how and understands how to use all the tools available, to get them where they need to be. And you can't always find that in a study. We can learn some interesting stuff about the mechanics. I agree with you as far as the estrogen goes to some extent. I think you can feel estrogen, or else why in the world are we even talking about it? So I think you can feel estrogen when estrogen is at its best place. You can tell if you're really in tune with your body. If it's too low, bad. If it's too high, and you're having symptoms, which is the reason why I'm driven by how you feel. If it's too high and you're having issues, we look at many different factors, including your estrogen. We always look at that. We don't ignore it, and we adjust everything appropriately until that patient's dialed in. So they're not going to be the type of person that comes to our clinic and which I imagine this happens at clinics all the time. If they don't get dialed in, then they're going to go somewhere else. And if they go somewhere else, then I wouldn't know. So I'm going to think, hey, my protocol is working great. All of my patients are doing great. But it's because the patients that aren't doing great have left. So that's that. So I like to be open to everything, especially in something so new and something that is so challenging and so controversial. I like to be open to it, and then educate the patients as best I can. Use it as a tool, not as like a hard line religion like we talked about before.
Can I
Okay,
ask
perfect.
two questions
go ahead.
really quick based on what
Yeah,
you just said? So you were saying that using a tool and whatnot. What will, in your opinion, higher levels of estradiol do? What are the things that men are going to say? I know how you're going to answer, but I just want you to hear it. My E2 is high because I feel like this is. And the other thing is, how is it possible that every single physician I know that used to use an AI and now doesn't use an AI for any other patient? So collectively, we're talking several tens of thousands of patients, including every guy I've worked with. Why is it that they experience none of those E2 issues whatsoever?
Well, okay, let me try and go to the first question. What happened? So if someone calls me up and says, I'm having symptoms because my estrogen level is, I'm like, whoa, stop right there. Stop right there. Tell me first how you feel. And I intentionally don't even look at the labs until we go over how they feel and what's going on. And then we think about what they're taking, how much testosterone they're taking, how they're taking it, and the other factors that are involved, because in many cases it's not their estrogen at all. And they'll, if it comes to the point of once we do look at their labs, and I go by how the patient feels. So I think too many clinics and too many doctors out there, and this is how we're trained in medical school. We are trained to take the labs, look at a piece of paper like this, not the patient, but look at the piece of paper like this and say, boom, 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 this is what you need to be on. Hi, by the way, how are you doing? And it's wrong. So I've seen patients where and this is how this, I feel, is a more open way of practicing medicine. So I'll see a patient that, let's say, has an estradiol of 60, which in my opinion, I don't think that's that bad, but what's going to determine whether that's bad or not, or bad, is his symptoms, his issues. If everything else is going perfect, if everything else is fine, we've tried adjusting, microdosing, and doing different things, and he's still having issues, then yes, maybe instituting some anastrozole, or if not anastrozole, we have plenty of other tools, exemestane, letrozole. I've even formulated my own version of an estrogen blocker, because anastrozole is not perfect for everybody, so so our Viking estrogen control, which is working out really well for people. So and we work on things and we experiment because this is something completely new to that person, specifically to that person. And once we get them on therapy, and he comes back in, or we get them rolling with the new protocol, we get them back in 6 or 8 weeks. His estradiol, maybe it's 50, maybe it's 45, maybe it's 25. And he comes back and he says, I feel awesome now. I am dialed in. I feel great. I'm having all of my benefits. I love it. Please don't change anything. I'm perfect. So I call that individually, I call that a win. I'm not, and it's no matter, I don't care what tool we use, as long as it's safe, obviously, but that is a win. Then, on the other hand, I have other guys that I work with, and they call me up and they say, Chris, I feel awesome, everything's perfect, I'm feeling wonderful, and by the way, I'm not taking an AI. I'm like, okay, but you feel great, you feel good, and everything is kicked off, everything's awesome. I look at their labs, their estradiol's a 95. I'm like, okay, great, well, we know it's a 95, but this is you, and you feel great. Who am I to try and make you feel worse just because I think that you need to be on a pill? And I think that's the problem where a lot of clinics run into.
So Chris, what are some of the symptoms that you, if somebody came to you and you had to guess and say, okay, I think that I'm going to look at their estrogen, what would be some of the symptoms someone might come to us with, and you'd say, okay, if I were a betting man, I'd bet it was estrogen?
Well, I tell every single one of my patients that are brand new with CRT that all of your hormones are important. They're all important. There's a sweet spot or a zone for all of them to be. You don't want your estrogen to be too low, and you don't want it to be too high. If it's too high, you typically you can experience fatigue, water weight gain, poor motivation, difficulty maintaining a strong erection, mood instability, depression, anxiety. Maybe acne. Gyno is kind of one of the later things to come. It's not always, as common as people think it is. Blood pressure issues, even, so those are possibilities of things that could, not to say it's going to happen to every single person when they get to an estradiol of 65. I think that's the problem with studies and a lot of Western medicine. We're so regimented and we want to make things so fit in a box to make it easy for us. And it's not easy.
Okay. And then let me ask you this question, because a lot of times this whole estrogen thing for a lot of people, and I've seen it over and over, comes down to if your estrogen is too high, then your testosterone is too high. That's kind of the common theme between that and the common thought. So if I pass that over to you, Danny, if someone's estrogen is too high, is that true? It's because they're taking too much testosterone beyond what their body wants? Or how do you feel about that sort of thought process that people have?
So the issue here is that everything you guys are saying is based on the notion of estradiol in a higher amounts causes these issues. So we need to keep that in mind.
No, I didn't say that.
Well, you're talking about, you said that at higher levels, you just mentioned cause fatigue, water gain, motivation issues, erection problems, depression, anxiety, gyno. That's
so they may cause those things. It depends on the person.
May. Okay.
May cause those things.
Okay, so let's clarify. In some men, those things can occur.
It's possible, yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So the interesting thing is that it's testosterone that will increase fluid retention over time, which is transient. It's not the estradiol that does that. It's transient and typically dissipates over time. You can take a mild over-the-counter diuretic if you want to really accelerate flushing out that water, and once it's flushed out, it typically does not come back. So it hasn't come back and your estradiol levels are the same. Well, guess what? It wasn't the estradiol. Erections are heavily driven by estradiol levels. And when I say heavily driven, I'm not saying, if you take too much, it hurts your erections. No, in every single study, and I'm going to go through them after, where they gave estradiol, erection strength improved. If you want libido and erections, you want estradiol. And the more of it, the better it's going to improve. And I know you're looking at me saying this guy is high. I get it.
No, I'm actually not. I'm not. I think that I think that I'm not saying estrogen does play a part in erections for sure. It does. And we know that because if I just open up the box and start fooling with the dial, something's going to happen with your erections,
Mhm.
either good or bad, and that's what I'm saying. Like, but, and that's the thing. We just have to be open enough to see all of the dials and actually look at them.
Right.
But I
But
do personally, I personally, if my estrogen, and that's why one of the reasons why, and somebody on the chat thing had asked that as well. They said basically, Jeremy said that the VA won't prescribe an AI, but the VA won't let your testosterone levels go above 800 either. So
Yeah.
if they go above 800, then they bring you back down. So there may not need. So that was the kind of the question on at what point in time is your testosterone level too high if you do need an AI. But personally, if I don't keep my estrogen in check, I have all of the what I would call the classic symptoms of the excess water. I have brain fog. There's sexual issues. I have those problems, as do a lot of other people. Now, again, I have a percentage of people that don't need it to do need it. I don't personally have that, but I do know that that is real for a lot of people. So I don't think that we just discredit that altogether. But go ahead, Danny.
if you were to take the position of, I'm going to assume it's not the estradiol. So if it's not the estradiol, what is causing these issues? Imagine you eliminate that variable from your argument and say, I know it's not the estradiol. There's nothing in the medical literature that states anything that demonstrates that estradiol does any of these things. I'm going to eliminate that. Now let me focus on what's left. Can I alter frequency of injection? Can I alter, maybe they need more testosterone a week, maybe they need less testosterone a week. In every single case, just a tweak of their protocol will eventually get them feeling as good or better than they did before without the aromatase inhibitor. I'll give you a very fast example, and I'm just going to use me as an example. I was so tied to taking an AI. The reason I wanted to take an AI is prior to TRT, I had really bad gynecomastia. I actually did a video about it. And I knew I was deficient in testosterone, so I said, I got to take tests, but I'm going to need the AI to make sure this gyno doesn't get any worse. And the interesting thing is the entire time I took the AI, all of my chest fat remained. I actually got worse. The gyno pretty much stayed where it was. It was always kind of tender. And with time, when I decided not to take the aromatase inhibitor, I started actually figuring out ways of tweaking my protocol. I brought my testosterone levels up because back then I was only giving myself one injection a week, and I don't do well with one injection a week. I figured out for me, every other day shots was the best way to do it. I was able to continually bring up my testosterone levels, and lo and behold, the more I brought my testosterone levels up, the more chest fat I lost, the more the gyno itself shrank. And I have studies right here demonstrating that raising testosterone and estradiol will actually have a favorable impact on gyno, which is the complete opposite of what everybody believes. Most people are getting gyno when they're hypogonadal, when they have tanked level of testosterone, and when they have tanked levels of testosterone, they have tanked levels of estradiol. In every single study where they gave estradiol to men, their gyno doesn't get worse. Their gyno actually improves. So this is the problem with most physicians is they're saying, we know that E2 can do this. We know that E2 might do this. So therefore, let's keep this in mind and keep this under control and work on everything else. And that's the part that people have to say, no, it's not that. Let's put this aside. It's something else. When we give estradiol to men, they don't get water retention. Their erections improve. Increasing testosterone, increasing estradiol as well will actually improve depression and anxiety. When Chris, you were just stating that if it goes up, it can actually cause depression, anxiety. I haven't found a single study. Every study I have demonstrates the complete opposite. The very first thing I actually noticed when I stopped taking AI, it took a couple of weeks, and it caught me totally by surprise. I felt I was able to breathe easier, which I didn't even understand how that was even possible. And it wasn't just like a one-day thing. It went on for days and weeks. That is like, my breathing has improved. This is the weirdest thing. Why would AI stopping taking AI improve my breathing? Like it was a significant thing that I noticed. And even during the time of taking the AI, of trying to get it in that magical range, the 20 to 30 that all the doctors are taught from the bodybuilders, from the neuroscience,
Yeah.
was, I would take my AI and then I would say, okay, well, I'm having erectile issues. So is it because I took too much and my estradiol is too low? Or maybe I didn't take enough and my estradiol is too high, because everybody knows that low E2 issues are the same as high E2 issues,
Yeah, no,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And then it's like, well, do I need to take the AI the day of my shot? Because then, or maybe I have to take it the next day because it'll take some time for testosterone to peak and then that converts to estradiol. So how do I time all of this stuff? For years? I tried, and I gave up. I said, the hell with this. I'm fed up of it. And when I stopped, lo and behold, I'm like this all the time. I measured my E2 at 60. How the hell can I have a libido and erections with 60 when everybody is taught it's got to keep it between 20 and 30? I made polls in my Facebook group to say, does anyone have any really high, crazy levels? There's guys with levels of 130, and they said our libido is out of control. Their wives want to leave them. This is like, I literally need it 3 times a day. It completely goes against everything that we were taught, because where did we learn all this stuff? It was from the bodybuilders. All of this TRT stuff, the doctors learned from bodybuilders. Say, hey, I measured this guy and his testosterone levels are low. I don't know if this might be it. You're a bodybuilder, you use testosterone, tell me all about it. And that's where they learned it from. The problem is that all the bodybuilders were taking not just testosterone, they were taking a bunch of other compounds, some of them that would heavily aromatase into estrogen. And they knew that, if I'm taking Dianabol and I'm taking Anastrozole and I'm taking that, I'm going to have to control my estrogen, because otherwise I get all these issues. But we're talking about guys on crazy doses of androgens having to add all these drugs. And with each drug, there's a side effect. You've got another drug. And then that drug is a side effect. Some of these bodybuilders are on like 20 different drugs. But that's how they were taught. So by default, okay, estrogen is bad. We got to control it. And we have to raise their testosterone. And it just isn't that at all. It just doesn't that at all. You can let me know when I can spend a couple minutes and just show you what I've got, and you're going to jump out of your chair.
Yeah, well, let's do that. Let's go back to Chris and have Chris answer some of the stuff that we've heard.
Yeah, so no, I've looked at your the Google Drive with the studies and stuff, and a lot of the studies are very interesting, and I'm not and I don't think they all they don't specifically address the individualization issue, and that's the problem with studies, is that we have to have some type of individual clinical experience behind this, because when it comes down to it, the more I practice this and the more patients I see, I realize that I cannot harp on this enough. Everybody's very different. So if you come to my clinic, let's say Sam, okay, we've got Sam and we've got Danny, all right? So Sam is in the camp where he is dialed in already, and he's dialed in on with the use of anastrozole. He's feeling great. Okay. Danny's feeling great, with on his therapy, with the use of no AI, and he's feeling awesome. And at Viking, both of you guys have a place here. We can sit down and have a discussion and work through everything right here. Because unfortunately, the problem is, I think the problem with a lot of clinics is that either Sam or Danny have been disenfranchised at many other clinics before. And you can't, you don't have the place, because the doctor, either this or that or whatever, has what are, they are very strict. They're, there are certain tools they use, certain tools they don't use. And that's the thing that makes Viking different. So please don't lump us in the same category with other clinics or other schools of thought. I agree with you. So many, the bro science has been like a foundation, a horrible foundation of our knowledge with HRT in many cases, and it's been a mess, but we have to be very careful as we begin understanding a new field and a new form of treatment for helping people with hormones. It's so individualized that you will never hear me say in every single case. You'll never hear me say that. You'll never, because I haven't been practicing long enough that I know what's going to happen in every single case. Like I just haven't, and even the research study, like I've had patients come up to me and they feel awesome. They're dialed in, and I cannot explain how in the hell it happens. But for them, that's where they're at their best, so we have to be careful in boxing things out, even, and the studies are designed to create clinical boxes, to make things, very strict. This is how things work. But they only give us small nuances in reality. Like they can't go through, a study will never be able to explain, or they'll never even try to focus on those 2%ers. I don't know if you've ever seen that, because those 2%ers or even 5%ers. I have guys that I'll tell them right off the bat. I'll look at their labs and we'll talk, and I'm saying, you know what, dude, you're a 2%er. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, the way hormones work mechanically in your system is you're different, you're unique, and you're only 2% or 5% of guys are like that. So a study would never be able to explain, you'd never be able to pull anything from a study to help them. So what's going to happen is that those guys, if I as an advisor or clinician disenfranchise them and say, I know your system is a 2%er, but I need to force you to be like 98% of everybody else, or whatever it is, then they're going to go somewhere else. They're not going to be at their best. They're going to go somewhere else. And this is all, if this is all about optimization, then we have to be able to look at all of the factors appropriately and be able to dial things in individually. Because in my case, like as a clinician, it's not about what I take or how things work for me. And this is one thing I realized very early, that patients don't care how I take the medication. It doesn't matter to them. What really matters to them is what's going to suit them and get their goals the best. And if I'm driven by that, and specifically driven by that, and they come in with an issue, then yes, I'm going to look at all the different factors. I'm going to be looking at prolactin and SHBG, and I'm going to be looking at, the different breakdowns of estrogen and increasing their estrogen, or I'm going to look at everything, and that's what it's all about, because this is so new. We have to be open. We have to.
But I'll just bring myself back into this. If I do the same thing that I'm doing and I drop my AI, I start feeling what I would call mainstream or classic estrogen symptoms. I've started.
But how long have you done that for, though? Like, how long have you?
I've done it for a month straight, dropping the AI totally, and just to see and hope that it just clears itself up. But sexually, it's not the same. As far as my mental capacity goes, it isn't the same. I get that water weight gain. I mean, I just get these symptoms, and there's been so many times where somebody came to me and said, all right, I finally decided to start taking my AI, and now everything's kind of worked out. Now I'm feeling great. That's happened a lot of times. Now, is it possible that someone just hasn't come and said, I stopped taking my AI and now I feel awesome? I mean, I wouldn't say that has never happened. I just feel that it's far rarer than people that had the whole never AI mentality, didn't do anything, had these symptoms, all of a sudden said, okay, let's just give this a try. And in a couple of weeks, they come back and say, you know what? I'm in this stuff. I feel 100% dialed in now. So there has to be something on the AI side that says that and it's not just a couple, there's a good, decent group of people that need an AI to get feeling great. Because right now, under my protocol, I've been doing this over 2 years. What I'm doing right now is amazing. And it continues to be amazing as long as I stay on that regimen. And it includes an AI, at least for me. If I get off of it, I've tried it before, tried it for a month, see if anything did, and everything just went totally haywire. I hated it.
Yeah, I've gone 2.5, 3 months without an AI, just as an experiment. And I encourage some of my more precise, intelligent patients to try it, just as an experiment. Let's jump into it and see, we work on it just to play around. And I did it myself, and there were some ups and downs where there were some times when I did feel a little bit better, and then where I was inconsistent. And then, but that, like I said, that is just me. Who cares about me? But then I have other patients when, as soon as we get them off their AI, man, they're cruising, they're doing great, and then, and they might be doing great for 2 or 3 months. And then they're like, well, no, I'm starting to kind of drag a little bit. And then, so we work with it. And then I have other patients that if they are not taking their AI, they're just not where they need to be. So we, at Viking, we have a place for both camps, and we like to keep, our clinical judgment very open. And that's what's so critical in this new, pioneering of this field, is we can't understand things if we just block it out. Because as soon as we block people out, they're going to go somewhere else, and we won't see them, so we won't know how well they're dialed in, honestly.
Yeah, I've heard it 100 times where someone comes and says, you know what, I started that whole entire testosterone thing. They're not using an AI. I felt great for a few weeks. I was like, this is amazing. It changed my life and so on. And all of a sudden they're like, I fell off the end of a cliff. What happened? And that's when, if you go back in, you start looking at the things. Now, I don't do anything. I'm not a doctor. I don't make any of those. But that's when we pass them back to the medical team. They start getting on the AI. They're like, okay, I got this thing now. Now I'm sort of. But I don't want to take away, Danny, from the studies that you want to talk about. Everything that we want to talk about, I want to get those in. So without getting too geeky, because people can only their eyes glass over and roll in the back of their head. Quickly, what are your studies that support what we're talking about?
I just want to confirm something that Chris said, because he makes a very good point, and I wish more people would realize what he just said about what would I take or what Chris takes. And I'm addressing the viewers here. You wouldn't believe how many times a day someone asks me, Danny, you seem to be doing really good. Your body has changed and everything has changed. What are you taking? Yeah. And mostly what I reply to them is like, what difference does it make? Well, I want to know what you're taking. Why? What I take has no bearing whatsoever on what is going to work for you. I could tell you what I take,
exactly.
But see, for you to go say, well, I'm going to do what Danny Bossa does, well, you're just being a moron. Like, it doesn't work that way. You have to find out what works for you. Because if everybody took what I take, and it worked, well, we could just close up shop and we don't need any of this. Everybody take this, every other day shots, do this, and everybody's fixed. But it doesn't work that way. It took me a really long time to figure out what I need. And when I give advice to anybody, or I should say an opinion again, because I'm not a physician, I don't tell them do this because I do that and that's what works for me. Because there's some things that don't work for me at all. And I tell everyone, you should really try doing this. I happen to be an exception where it doesn't work for me. But you really want to consider doing this for X and X reasons. So that's a big point. Don't go on forums or in groups or whatever else and say, hey, how about this guy? What does he take? And what does he take?
That's right.
Figure out what you need for you to feel your best. And Sam, very, very quick point. When you said I stopped taking the AI and I tried it for a month, whenever I tell somebody to stop taking an AI, I tell them right off the bat, you may very well feel worse before you get better, and it's normal. You may very well need a good 2 months or longer, because if you've kept your estradiol lower from taking an AI and now you pull that out, now those levels are going to start coming up. But all the supporting hormones and everything else happening in your physiology needs time to balance out, and that can take time. You might get water retention, and I feel this, and the next day I felt like that, and wow, I had a crazy erection, now I got no erection, and it's going to be all over the place until you stabilize. Virtually every single guy we ever work with does eventually stabilize. And the other interesting thing is the ones that are worrying about E2 are the ones that learned about E2. Most guys that go to these physicians that I deal with, all they know is they feel like shit. They know there's something's off. The physician checks them out. You're deficient. What are your symptoms? My symptoms are this. You're a prime candidate for TRT. We're going to give you some testosterone to try, and then we're going to see what happens. Most of the physicians I use start off guys at 150 milligrams a week. And they said about 95% of them, once they've done that, they're dialed in. Couple, 8 weeks later, calls the patient, how are you? Oh my God, I feel fantastic and everything is so much better. And oh my God, it's great. They haven't gone to the forums and learned about E2 issues or this issue, and they haven't been brainwashed by all this stuff. All they know is they had a problem, they're on test, and they feel better. The guys that do worry about the E2 issues are the guys like us that want to learn about every little thing because we're like biohackers and we want to tweak stuff, and we were all taught that E2 was bad. And our whole methodology was based on E2 causing all these symptoms. Yet all these other guys that never learned about E2, they have none of those symptoms. The interesting thing is when I was on the AI and I was worried about all these symptoms that I would have if I got off them, and guess what? I didn't have any of these E2 symptoms. They all went away and everything improved across the board. I'm going to skim through some stuff really, really, really fast. And I'm going to do it quickly, not because I want to put less importance on them, but just to show the sheer number of data we have on the subject, to show you that I'm not just pulling this stuff out of my butt. We'll start with actually very, very, very quick. Men are saying, are aromatase inhibitors toxic? They are toxic. Aromatase inhibitors, like I said at the beginning, were designed for women with breast cancer. We're going to give them something toxic that is hopefully going to do something to prevent them to not die. So you're taking something that's bad to prevent something worse. The guys on TRT not have cancer. You shouldn't be taking a toxic substance regardless, okay? If I said, well, here's some rat poison, we just take a little bit of rat poison, it's going to be fine. Are you going to figure out what is the lowest amount of rat poison I can take that's not going to make me sick? Like, why take a toxic substance at all? Very, very quick. I'll show you a bunch of studies.
Danny,
Yep,
Danny,
go ahead.
Danny, so what toxicity is present in anastrozole?
I can show you right now. We'll go through them really, really
Okay.
quick. Okay. I'm going to show you titles of stuff that everybody after this, they can go back and you can look up these titles. You can find these titles, and then you can take all the time in the world to read through them. Okay. So here's one right here. Can you read? Is this coming out in reverse on your end, or is it coming
That's
out?
good.
No, it's perfect.
Toxicity of
Okay.
aromatase inhibitors.
Toxicity of aromatase inhibitors may explain lack of overall survival improvement. The longer use of AIs was associated with increased heart disease and bone fractures. The cumulative toxicity of aromatase inhibitors when used as a front treatment may explain the lack of overall survival benefit despite improvements in disease-free survival. So they're basically saying that long-term use of AIs was actually detrimental to the survival rate of cancer patients. Okay,
Now,
here's
what
another.
level did it say? Did it say what level
Yeah.
that was? I mean, like saccharin will cause cancer, but when they give it to mice, it's like 100,000 times what anybody would take.
Okay.
Other than that, it's good. So what did it say anything in there about what the dosage was?
So this one here is again specifically for women on breast cancer. It's not for men. This was a study of over 30,000 patients. They were just talking about AI use, and obviously every single patient is probably have a different amount of AI. So they didn't say this was the dose being given to 30,000 patients. Okay.
Okay, so the standard dose for anastrozole for breast cancer patients is 1 milligram per day. That's the starting dose. Okay, so that's a huge dose, and it's a very, very big statement. And that's the problem with research studies. We have to be able to read through with we're trained in how to actually read through a research study and what they're getting at. You can pull a one-liner out of anything, and it can sound really, really bad. But as far as toxicity, like that level of toxicity, oh my God, this is going to kill you. There are plenty of studies I could pull, that say, that about anything, but
do you have a study that shows a benefit of taking an aromatase inhibitor for a man on TRT? Do you have one?
Oh yeah, I could probably pull some up, but I have, but I also have thousands of patients that can call you and tell you, flat out. And
no, I realize what they will
Yeah.
feel and what they will saying, I'm taking this and I feel
Good.
better. But is there a study that you have found that says took some men on TRT, and when given an aromatase inhibitor, their health improved?
Yeah, I do have some actually.
I'd love to see that,
But still,
because
sure.
I haven't found one.
Okay. No, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. No, well, and now, so again, I think it's important to see us, we're on the same team as pioneers in this. Okay, so our medical standards of practice come from, well, experience and from research. Okay, so the standard medical practice, I think we both can agree, standard medical Western practice for hormone replacement therapy is awful. It's absolutely horrible.
Absolutely.
Where does it come from? It comes from experience, and it comes from research studies. So, trying to say, hey, we have a new novel way of treating people, and we're using research studies, from years ago, from who knows when, we have research studies to back what we're doing. Like that's, yes, there you can pull some information from it, but you have to be very, very careful with the way that you read these things. It's so critical, because it will put you in a very boxed in type of treatment, and you'll miss out on people, you'll miss out on patients, optimizing them.
So I'll tell you what, in an
That's
effort
all
to
I'm saying.
save time, let's
So because if anastrozole was truly toxic, then it never would have been approved by the FDA.
well, the problem is that they're saying,
Danny, we lost your sound there, buddy.
I got
can't hear me?
I can hear you.
You can hear me okay?
I hear
Yeah,
you
I can hear
fine.
you now. Yeah.
Oh, that's weird. Okay. The problem is that when you are, you got to think about it. I have a family member who's got cancer right now, and he's going through chemo. Is chemo good for you? Well, no, it's terrible for you, but it's hopefully going to prevent them from not dying. Somebody who's doesn't have cancer is not going to take chemo, because that would be stupid, right? This is the same thing. Is this substance has demonstrated toxicity. If you don't have cancer, why would you take it? Well, because I don't want to get gyno. Well, every single study I have here that shows that you gave an AI, it actually didn't help the gyno. the ones that their estradiol was raised, their gyno actually improved. It's the complete opposite of what we were all taught, which is, I agree, is crazy. Very, very quick. Here's one right here. If you can read that. Toxicity of
Toxicity of
aromatase
anastrozole.
inhibitors. It's generally been effective in the setting. Long-term use significantly increases the risk of endometrial cancer and thrombolism. Newer agents, especially third-generation aromatase inhibitors, have been proven to provide superior efficacy over things like tamoxifen, albeit with a different toxicity profile. Clearly, adverse events from these agents increase morbidity. Long-term follow-up is needed to determine if this translates to change in mortality as well. The adverse effects profiles discussed here reveal that toxicities from aromatase inhibitors will have a significant impact on the quality of life of these individuals who are essentially disease-free from cancer. We got another one here, the trade-offs of 10 years of aromatase inhibitors. Right on the back, it says, it talks about women that were prescribed anastrozole after their cancer was done, had no marked extension of their lives. You can look that one up really quick. Here's one over here, managing the toxicities of aromatase inhibitors. Physicians should be aware of silent side effects. Screening for bone loss and hypocholesterolemia is critical. Patients should be treated accordingly. Emerging data on the side effects of aromatase inhibitors. Despite the therapeutic benefit of exemestane observed, a cohort of 582 women randomized to exemestane and tamoxifen had persistent sexual and gynecologic effects at 7 years of follow-up, mainly loss of libido and depression. Here's another one here from Hal.
I still think a lot of this comes down to the dose that we're taking here. And
why would it come down to the dose?
Because if I take a little bit of sugar, I'm okay. If I overdo my sugar, I can get diabetes. So it isn't necessarily that just because something's toxic, just because in larger quantities it's toxic. Something's toxic at whatever level your body can't maintain or control it. That's the level of toxicity. So I'm not going to try to pretend like I'm the medical guy here. I'm just moderator, but I'll throw it back to Chris. There has to be something between these studies that we need to know more variables before we can actually say, okay.
Yeah. So in that last study that you mentioned with the exemestane in the women, with hyposexuality, for example, these are basically how a lot of these studies are ran. If I were to take 100 women and I know I'm simplifying things, but if I were to take 100 women and give in a study, you have to give all of them the same dose. Typically, so they're all taking the exact same thing. And there's percentages of statistical significance. So if I give 100 women exemestane and 15 out of 100 have hyposexuality, then that's a statistical significant factor that we have to report. Or if 40% of them, or whatever, I don't know what the percentage is, but but I can tell you this: if I see 100 patients, then I know 100 of them are not going to take the same freaking thing. That just doesn't make sense.
Absolutely.
And if anyone does have a factor of hyposexuality or another issue, then that's when we are intelligent and open enough in order to change things and make things. So in order to say, okay, if 100 people that were all put on the same thing, 15% or whatever, 25, 30% of them had hyposexuality, that means exemestane is bad altogether. You can't make that blanket statement, and the studies will, reading through line by line of the studies, will make you want to draw those conclusions. But in order to be efficient at scientific journal reading, you cannot make statements like that.
Okay, but can you basically make a logical argument to say, I understand you're saying, well, this is women may be taking higher doses, we don't know the dose and so on and so forth, but we're demonstrating that this drug causes loss of bone mineral density. It'll cause some cardiovascular issues. It'll cause issues with sexuality. It'll cause all these different things that we can go through. And it's okay, but that's at a higher dose. Okay, but would that not necessarily imply that if you're taking a little bit, it'll cause a little bit of those issues? And maybe if you take a lot of it, it'll cause a lot of those issues. But no matter what, that drug is going to cause these issues, whatever it may be, perhaps in relation to the dose you're taking. But so then, well, why take it at all? If I know that if I take this drug at a medium-sized dose, my risks are X, Y, Z, well, why would I want to even take a little bit, especially if I don't have cancer?
So
medications, want to take any bit at all?
So pharmacokinetics generally do not work like that. So when you're talking about a medication, there's a dose. There's a dose that's relatively flat, and at a certain dosage point, and this is how we determine how much people take of certain medications. At a certain level, after a certain amount of time, that's when issues start happening. Okay, so if we're way back here when things are flat, then you're not having any issues, any at all. And then when you get to a certain point, that's when problems start happening. Like, for example, Tylenol. Tylenol right now, Tylenol right now would not pass the FDA. It would be considered way too toxic. It wouldn't pass.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So like you can say, there are plenty of studies that I can read that I can pick out a line in a study and say Tylenol causes liver toxicity. Oh my God, Tylenol's bad. Don't take it. If you take a dose, if you take Tylenol every other day, or, if you take it when you have a headache, or you take it for a specific reason, within reason, then, and within your symptoms and how you're feeling for a good reason, then it's not going to cause any liver toxicity at all. It's not going to cause a little bit. It's not going to cause a medium. It's not, but a study will tell you something different. If depending on how you read it. Do you see what I'm saying? So we have to be careful with this new field and being open.
I think I could come in and do a study with, let's say, 1,000 men. I bring them in, I give them 1 milligram a day of anastrozole. And in that study, at the end of it, I come back and I say, oh my gosh, it makes you feel like shit. Like anastrozole makes you feel like shit. There's no reason to ever take this thing. But I have to still go back and I have to say, okay, but what if I would have gone to that same group of people and taken 0.5 milligram twice a week, 1/4 milligram twice a week? Would they feel better on that than they would have felt at anything at all? And I don't know at what point in time, or none at all, but I don't know at what point in time feeling great and dialed in like I do right now. I feel amazing. Everything about everything is amazing with me, but I've had a lot of time to go up and down and dial in and dial out. And it wasn't where I started from, I can tell you that. And most people aren't where they started from to where they actually get dialed in. So I just want to be able to say that, again, it seems to be just individualized. I'm one that needs it. A lot of other people seem to need it, but I just don't want to go into the whole thing because there's a study without knowing what the dosage was, that it's a bad thing based upon that.
Sure. So let's eliminate all of the toxicity based on, and I think we can all agree that, is it determinant on the dose? Maybe. So let's leave that as an unknown. Okay. And
on men, and also on men, because I think we're physiological, a little bit different. So let's go to studies where 1,000 men were given anastrozole.
Okay. So let's look at some actual studies on men, and we're not going to talk about toxicity anymore. We're going to leave that completely out of the equation. So here's one right here. Estradiol level influences telomere length in older men. Telomere length is a measure of biological age. If you raise estradiol levels, the more you would raise estradiol levels, the longer the telomere length. The more you bring the estradiol levels down, the shorter the the length of telomeres, as per the study of almost 3,000 men. You can Google that one and look it up.
Okay, so in response to that study, that is an interesting study. I've read that one, and it is very interesting. So big picture, that studies like that, you cannot take a study and then make a leap to something else. Like, therefore, because higher estrogen causes higher telomere length, therefore we want everybody's estrogen to be as high as it possibly can to make you, estrogen will make you live longer or something like that. Like that's a leap in the reading of a scientific journal that you cannot make.
No, but if you're interpreting it that way, I agree. All they said was, we looked at all these men, we looked at telomere length, and we saw that the higher the estradiol, the longer the telomere length. And that's it. They're not, nowhere in this article did they say, please raise your estradiol levels, drink this stuff all day long and you'll live forever. No, they never said anything like that. Agreed there.
No, but in the support of not taking an AI as that's inferred by, holding up that study saying, hey, see, high estrogen is so because I have some patients that literally, if their estradiol, not everybody, but I have some patients that if their estrogen goes up too high, the risk that they face in their wife killing them outweighs, the telomere length.
Yeah.
So we have
I'm
to put
horrible
it
without it. I'm horrible without it. Yeah, personally.
Here's and again, these guys, everybody, you can look these ones up. High estrogen in men after injectable testosterone therapy, the low T experience. You can look this one up, and it talks a lot about this study from Finkelstein called Gonadal Steroids and Body Composition, Strength, and Sexual Function in Men. This was a really, really interesting study. And basically what they did is they took 200 men between the ages of 20 to 50, and they did a double-blind randomized study. So they had two separate groups. One group they gave testosterone and a placebo, and the second group they gave testosterone with anastrozole. Okay. In the group where they gave the testosterone and the anastrozole, they wound up with increased visceral fat, increased subcutaneous fat. They had loss of libido, erectile dysfunction, and dyslipidemia. Those who were on the testosterone placebo all had improved libido, improved sexual function, improved erections, loss of visceral fat, loss of subcutaneous fat, and lowered blood sugar, and lowered cholesterol. The patients taking aromatase inhibitors got worse, the placebo patients got better. And it basically showed that adding AI to testosterone caused an increase in breast tissue and gyno. I'll repeat that part. When they added an AI with the testosterone, it caused an increase in breast tissue and gyno, along with erectile dysfunction and loss of libido. And they found that the ones with higher levels of estradiol were not at all associated with loss of libido. Those who blocked it had lower libido, and the higher levels had higher libido. And the low libido was demonstrated with either low or normal levels of estradiol. So the common side effects that were reported in this study were, for the ones that on the AIs, were body aches, pains, breast swelling, tenderness, headache, trouble sleeping, tiredness, weakness, flushing, sweating, hair thinning, and weight gain. When taking testosterone, the higher the estradiol, the better the sexual function was in every single way, according to these ones. You can Google those ones. You can look them up. I'll show you two more really quick.
So in just in that one, again, when you're reading a scientific journal, the purpose of a scientific journal like that is to the double-blind randomized study. I get that, but the purpose is to try and ascertain, and I think in a lot of cases, like modern medicine is trying to come up with the answer. What is the protocol for men? And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to figure out what is the box that we can create where every man needs to be on exactly this, and so that the whole box theory like that, which is what the whole study is all about. Does this need to be in the box or does it not need to be? Like the whole, I want to just destroy the whole box because and create a box for each individual person, because everybody is very different. So I can tell you right now, if you put 100 people in a room, like in that study, nowhere in that study, I guarantee you, nowhere in that study did they actually try and dial anyone in. No, they put them all on exactly the same thing, which I am, completely opposed to.
Yeah,
So,
but it's still interesting that every single one that had the AI degraded, every single one without got better, every single one.
But and they put them on how much anastrozole? Like 1 milligram of anastrozole for 150 milligrams of testosterone.
No, but whatever, everyone got the same thing, as you said. Most likely, is according to, I'm pretty sure that's what it was according to the study. But it was interesting to think that the ones on the AI all did worse. The ones on without the AI all did better. So you can.
I'm pretty
Google
sure
that
I read.
one.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I read that one because I don't think that every single one. I don't think it's cut and dry like that. But still, the it doesn't, like studies like that. I don't think they're interesting to look at and to take some anecdotal information from at best, but they are not good at determining how we practice or advise patients, because still, I still am going to see a patient that is going to say, that ultimately, is going to be dialed in, or he's going to come to me telling me like, I am absolutely, I feel like Sam, I feel awesome. I feel great. And if I look at him and say, okay, well, if I'm going to take you on as a patient, I base my theory and my practice and the medications I prescribe based on this study, so we need to get you off of everything.
Yeah, of course not.
And you know what I mean? So so we have to be careful in how we, because everything we say online right now is furthering the field of hormone optimization. Like that's how I see it. We're building the blocks of this new field of medicine right now. And everything we say and everything we do, and it's tricky, and I just don't want to discount anything.
Yeah.
So let me ask you
I
this, guys,
completely
because
agree.
hey,
We can't
hey,
base on one study, right?
yeah, we're like an hour and 15 minutes into this thing, so I want to
Mhm.
kind of start to
Oh,
wind it down. But one of the things and it went by so fast for me at
It
least.
did. It did.
So one
Yeah.
of the
yeah,
things
dude.
one of the things I want to do is one of the questions is how can you naturally decrease your estrogen levels if you don't think that you want an aromatase inhibitor? Is there some is
Why
microdosing
would
going to
you?
help? Is there
But
going to?
but we
Well,
still get back to the same point. Is
because
why
some people
would
don't
you?
feel like you. If some people feel great on an AI and they don't want to take an AI, but when they don't, then they don't. Then is there something you can do that keeps that conversion, the aromatase process down a little bit?
I again this, and we're still going back to the same thing. Is everybody's blaming the estrogen, and I know because I was once like you guys. I was convinced that's what it was. That's what we're all taught.
Mhm.
And
I'm
as soon
not
as I got
convinced.
that out of my head,
Don't, yeah,
as
don't
soon
say
as
you
I
guys.
got
I'm
that out
not.
of my
Yeah.
head, and I said, okay, well, if it's not the estrogen, what is it? And we started looking at all the things that they are, like insulin resistance. Maybe your androgen level is too high. Maybe it's too low. Maybe you're injecting once a week and you've got really low SHBG. Do better with frequent injections. In every single guy that any of these physicians are working with, including myself, because I work with guys as well, we find ways to just tweak their protocol. And they're like, oh, that's it. I don't need the AI anymore. I don't need the AI. We don't have guys needing the AI. And if they would complain, I mean, we're in constant communication. They'd come back like, yeah, there's this. We're just not seeing it because if we did, there's going to be a point that we're going to say, hey, like they need an AI. Like it's clear, cut and dry. They need an AI because when they do get better, we don't see any of that. We are just not observing. And then I asked the physicians, like, do you even have one? And they're like, no, they're all great and they're all thanking me. And I
I think that's
I
awesome, and
understand.
I
Yeah.
see that. I see that too. I have a whole camp of people that are like that, but all I'm saying, my point is, I agree with that form of treatment and that the use of or the non-use of the tool anastrozole. I agree with that, and I agree with the theories as to many of the theories as to why. I'm just saying that if if I only focus on one camp, then I can fully say I don't see anyone that doesn't do well on without an anastrozole. I just don't see, and the reason why is because they leave, they're gone, they go somewhere else, or yeah, maybe I drag them along for 2 or 3 months and they get better. Good for them, that's great,
Mhm.
because I have patients like that. I have plenty of patients in my camp that are like that, but then I also have patients in my camp that I don't want to just disenfranchise or tell them, hey, I don't know what to do, or I don't want to check it, or I don't want to, that we help too, so so if I if I put on my blinders, then it's not gonna, I'm gonna miss out on a whole camp of people, and at
Mhm.
Viking we like to help, and really optimize, and everybody's very, very different, and either camp has a place, with us.
So let me
But,
ask you this question, guys. Let me ask you
yep.
if toward the end of this, let me ask you if I'm watching this and I look and I say, hey, you know what? I'd like some of those points Danny's throwing up there. And let's say I just said, screw that AI. I'm not taking it. And nobody's forcing an AI down your throat, right? So if you were to come back and say, let's just try this thing. Give me 2 months. I'm not going to take my AI and I'm going to see if what Danny says is true. And then I don't need an AI. My body has come back into homeostasis or whatever happens. Is there any negative effect beyond the fact that you could probably feel like crap for a while you're going through the adjustment period? Is there any long-term negativity that's going to happen to you if you just decide to try it and see what happens if you
Tran
don't take an AI?
Absolutely transient. There is nothing that like, oh, I stopped taking my AI, therefore I harmed my health. Absolutely not. Absolutely zero, zilch, nada, no way. It's going
Chris,
to be
I'm not I'm
transient.
not saying you're prescribing this because I'm just thinking as a guy who has no medical background and you shouldn't listen to me. I'm just saying if it were me in that spot, I might say, you know what, maybe I'm going to try not taking an AI and just see what happens. I'm going to give myself 2 months. But from a clinical doctor's perspective, medical perspective, is there any negativity that's going to come to you because of that, aside from the fact that you might feel
No,
right?
not at all. Not at all. And I agree. I agree. I actually encourage some of my patients, that are really digging into the science and they really want to geek out and understand how their body works, and they're in tune with their body. I encourage them to try that. I tell them, go 2 or 3 months and try it. Try and go without it. And let's see what happens. But guide yourself not by estrogen, this, that, or another. Guide yourself by how you feel and the symptoms. Focus on the symptoms, but definitely try it. And, you know, some of those guys, we go through that period. I work with them on that. At the end, you know, at the end, they're feeling great and they're dialed in without, and we work on, you know, frequency of injections. We work on other issues, and they get dialed in and they feel great. And then I have some of them that, you know, we work with it for a while and we can't ever find that balance, and we have to go with other tools and other sources, and we have access to them, and I know how to use them, you know, and we get them there, you know, and that's what's most important, is that we get them there.
Yep. Okay, guys. Well, I want to thank you. Is there anything else anybody wants to throw in at the end of this, or it's been about an hour and a half?
Danny,
Absolutely.
thank you for the studies. Thank you for coming on. It's been a good talk, man. I think the more we do stuff like this, the more we further the entire field, you know, which is so important. I mean, this is brand new, and like I said, we're pioneers in this. We're on the same team, so I really enjoy this sort of back and forth discussion.
Yeah, and I think out of all of this, I think part of what we've come to maybe agree on is that people are individualized. That's one thing that, as you said, Danny, you don't why do you care what I'm on? And Chris, you've said the same thing. Why do you care what I'm on? It's what you're on. It's where you feel well. And to have somebody come in and say, you need to stick in an Anastrozole, half a tablet down your throat twice a week. Okay, if that's is not something that anybody at Viking is going to do. In fact, I think we've already come to the conclusion here. If you want to try to stop taking your AI to see what's going to happen, you're not going to die from it. Right. So you can actually go and see if that actually helps you. But I think what we all agree on is no matter what that protocol ends up being, it is an individualized protocol. It is going to be your protocol, and it is going to depend solely upon how you feel while you're doing it.
The big takeaway, guys, for everybody that's throwing this back and forth in your head, the viewers are watching, is if you go, you know, again, don't take my word for it. There's studies, there's literature, it's all there. If you go see that the way that estradiol is basically the regulator for the HPT axis, for reproductive function, for growth hormone, IGF-1 axis regulation, for bone growth, for skeletal health, maintenance of metabolism, body composition, body fat, you have to say to yourself, why would I want to lower that stuff at all? Well, because I feel like this, like that. Okay, why not try to find a way that you can get all of the benefits that estradiol is bringing, and simply make some tweaks to your protocol that prevents you from feeling this way? Because I do that I do it all the time. I haven't found a guy that I just get to the end and I'm like, I can't figure you out. You need an AI. I just don't. All the physicians that we deal with don't. So it always leads me to believe if they have tried A and they have tried B and they've been demonstrated that B is better, which is all what they're doing now, that's what they're going to do. If they found that A was better, well, they would all go back to A. They would all go back to taking an AI. You have to ask yourself, how would it be possible that all of these physicians, I have literally nobody on AI, and they're doing well? Every single guy. I mean, I got thank you letters coming in. The most thank you letters I get above all else is the guys that say, I finally got off my AI, and holy shit, what a difference it made. I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those, more so than literally everything else that we've ever spoke about on that YouTube channel.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. So we hear, like, one of the questions I just want, what is an optimal T to E ratio? And I think that as the discussion has gone along, you really can't answer that. There is no answer to what's the right, there's no mathematical formula that we're going to plug these values into and it's going to spit out your protocol on the other side. So asking questions of what are different ratios or something, it's whatever your ratio is. That's what it is. And you're going to have to try it. It's going to be trial and error. You're going to have to wait a few weeks, a month, Danny, say up to 2 months sometimes, before you're actually going to find out that adjustment works for you. So you have to be patient with this stuff and understand it's not going to happen overnight. It might take 6 months to a year before I get dialed in. But once I get that, once I hit there, then I'm just home free. It's all downhill from there. So I encourage people to try different things and to just see what works for you, because that's really what it comes down to.
Guys, there's a video I did on the YouTube channel that I do a lot of work for, the TRT and Hormone Optimization YouTube channel. You can go find it. It's just called How to Find Your Ideal Dose. And it just basically teaches basic logic as to how to approach this thing, playing with, more or less, or frequency injection and the time that it takes. some really basic steps. And if you can just grasp that logic, you'll be on your way to figuring yourself out. So I hope that helps there.
Yeah,
Sounds
it's
great.
also really helpful to work with a medical professional too. So at Viking Alternative, you can call up. There's free consultations. We work with people. We talk about all of these issues. We work with people that that are not on an AI. We work with people that are on an AI. We understand both camps, and we're worried. The most important thing to us is how you feel, and we're guided by we're guided by your true optimization and everything, and doing everything we can to get you there.
Yeah, we have a lot of people we have a lot of people that are doing it on their own and are like, man, I just don't really feel comfortable with this, or I'm messing it up, I don't feel well. And then they're afraid to come to a clinic because they're like, oh my gosh, they're going to judge me, they're going to shut me down, I'm going to have to crush my testosterone levels. None of that is true. We want you under a medically supervised program, regardless of whether you're doing it on your own or so on. And Danny, I'm sure you're the same way with your side. Just come under the guidance of someone who knows how to do this, because
Absolutely.
It's not as easy as it sounds.
No, it's not.
And modifying this scientifically is going to get you there 10 times faster than you just randomly doing a whole bunch of stuff you read in some bro science forum.
Can I ask you guys a question really, really quick? And I never got a chance to ask you. A lot of guys reach out to me and like, oh, I was at Viking. They put me on this amount of testosterone a week, this amount of HCG, and this amount of AI. Why would you put a guy on AI right off the bat?
So again,
you haven't determined what the symptoms are going to be of this protocol. You haven't determined if they're going to have high E2 or low E2. You haven't determined anything. You're putting them on the AI by default, like as they start right out of the gate. Why would that ever be done?
Okay, so this is the best way I can answer that. The best thing would be, the quick answer is experience. The vast majority of the patients, I shouldn't say vast, but the majority of the patients, I guess, would need to should be on some form of estrogen blocking at that much testosterone per week. We've found, and this just comes from years of doing this, only doing this. So I'm not, we don't do hormones and other stuff and urology and other dermatologists. So we only do this, and we only focus on this, and we really dig into individualization of care. So if ultimately you're if we're focused on dialing you in, and when you become dialed in, if that means that we focus very much on the second consultation, third, fourth consultation, I think it does someone a much better service if they have a tool and they understand a tool and they don't use it, than if we completely ignore that aspect of their care and they never have the tool and it's never an issue. It's a much more I've found that ultimately, yes, I have a lot of guys that don't take an AI, but all of my guys that are at that point where they don't take an AI, they know what an AI is, and they have some in their medicine cabinet, and if they ever need to use it, they know what specifically they would need to look for, and they can reach out to me. But it sits there, and they don't need it, and most of them are fine. Some of them, they might take a quarter of a tablet once a month, maybe, if they feel like they need it at all. But it's the understanding of their own bodies and their hormones and how things are going, and that's what's most important. It usually turns out to a much more dramatic experience for guys to, because I have guys that come on and they say, hey, you know what, I follow such and such on YouTube, and I don't want to take an AI. I'm like, okay, no problem. I'm going to give it to you anyway. It's, it comes with a package. It's not, or, I'll say, okay, fine, we won't give it to you or whatever, and so they want to start without it. And I've found a higher percentage of a much more dramatic experience happening. Usually our first consultation is in 8 weeks. I usually will get a phone call from them at about 4 to 5 weeks. First couple of weeks, they feel great. Week 4, week 5, something dramatic, happens, or they're having anxiety attacks, or I've had phone calls from the emergency room, and I've had literally, it's a much more dramatic experience than if they were to be on an AI and they didn't need it. They'll make it to 8 weeks. They'll be feeling better, but not quite dialed in. And that's what we focus on. So that's when we start to tune things and back off on the AI if we need to, or make changes to. But at the end, education is the most important thing, and they have the tools available to them. So that's the reason why.
All right, guys. Well, Danny, I appreciate you coming on here. I hope that you think it was fair to do this. We tried to make it fair for both sides. I didn't want to skew anything at all. I want to give you both an opportunity to talk. I think that happened, so I feel comfortable with it. I think it was an excellent learning experience for people out there to at least start considering things and taking in this information and then making their own decisions about their health and well-being, saying, you know what, maybe I will try getting off the AI, or maybe I do want to try now. I've gotten some of those symptoms people are talking about, or whatever the case may be. But I think this was great. I appreciate both of you coming here, and I hope you guys have a excellent, and thanks for everybody bringing questions in as well. I wish I could have gotten to more of those, but like I said, we're already an hour and a half into this. You can't make it 3 hours long. So we'll keep doing stuff like this. We could have, right?
Oh yeah.
So we'll
probably.
keep doing it. I appreciate it. And you guys have an awesome weekend. Again, thank you so much.
You too, guys.
Thanks a lot, Danny. Nice to meet you.